From my perspective, was it more important to follow the law where the law was the criminal, or to save these little girls? There's Cartagena 1, 2, and 3, and from my standpoint. Cartagena 1 was when I went alone. The U.S. government blew me off, and I spent a week running my own thing. The second trip in, we had like 36, 38 girls, and they were all like half a mile, 500 yards from the operational house. And we're all set up. I mean, cameras are there, tactical teams are on the beach, on the roofs, everywhere. We're all wired up, Tim's there, we're pumped. I mean, those guys are funny because none of them drink, so they take and they pour beer on their shirts. And that was the first time I'd ever seen anything like that. So I'm actually drinking, I'm having a couple beers, and I'm thinking, you guys are freaking nuts. We got the girls there, vans full of these little girls. And we got, I think at that point, there was like 7 or 8 traffickers sitting there, like right there. I'm like, Tim, man, we gotta do this, because they're calling me. They're like, hey man, we're here. And I've already met, I know these guys. We're here, man. If this thing's happening, it's gotta move. And we had some undercover Colombian agents with us, and they didn't understand it either. Well, Tim's phone rings, and I looked at his face, and I knew immediately. I knew where this was going. And I don't remember if he threw the phone or he was very upset, and they called it off. They said, stand down, stand down. He's like, yeah, the operation, they just shut it down.
It's off. Everyone's gone home. The lawyers went home, the cops went home. It's over.
The first thing that went through my mind was, okay, this is why I operate black. And what I mean by that is, when I started in this in 2005, the police were the traffickers, okay? I get a lot of flack for going and knocking down doors and doing what I call black ops. I don't do that anymore. But at that time, that was the only way. That was the only way to rescue these kids. And from my perspective, was it more important to follow the law where the law was the criminal, or to save these little girls? And for me, my answer was clear. God's law reigns. There are times when you are put in a position where you're either going to do God's will, with the right thing, the moral thing, the thing that any person with a beating heart would do if you know these children are being raped and sold, or are you going to let the law stand in between that, especially when they're participating in it? So I chose at times, and Tim never did. Tim did not participate, did not fund. He didn't agree with it. And I didn't do this as part of OUR, but there were times where I had to take things in my own hands. That's what a black op is. Tim and I both, and everybody that was there, we were heartbroken, devastated. I told Tim, and Tim agreed. I'm like, man, we got to walk down the street. We got to go look these girls in the face, and we got to give these traffickers. We got to pay them. You know, as hard as it is to do it, we've got to make good, or we're going to lose them. And so Tim and I walked down the street, into this parking lot. There was these vans full of these little kids, and we looked at them. And Tim connected with one of the girls by the eyes, and I was dealing with paying people. And he said, you know, we can't ever let this happen again. I was pissed. I never was involved in the political side of it. I don't know how that all worked. Something happened, and Tim called me, and he's like, we're back on. Are you in? I'm like, of course I'm in. So we flew back down to Cartagena, tried to make contact with all the groups, and I think we only lost one. But we also were given the green light to go add more. So I think we added 2 more groups doing the street intelligence. We set it up like a quinceañera, a 15-year-old birthday party. The night of the op, I mean, they just kept bringing them in. I mean, I remember walking down the street with Marcos, and we had to walk about 10 blocks to get to the house, and we got all these little girls dressed, you know, behind us. It's a tourist zone, so they're all looking at us like they knew what was going on. The tourists did. So they come in and they take it out, and I don't know why, but everybody's on the ground. You know, we're perps, and Tim starts yelling, "Who's the rat? Who's the rat?" And I'm thinking, dude, we are Well, of course, the cops have guns to Tim and I, and they start racking everybody up, cuffing everybody up. They cuffed Tim and I together. And for whatever reason, that was not planned. I didn't even ever want to be cuffed. I've never been in cuffs in my life. I didn't want to start there. But it seemed like every op, or at least the next few ops for a year or so, it just ended up that Tim and I were always handcuffed together on the floor of these Latin American countries. From my perspective, if you're going to go somewhere, if you're going to get involved with something, you go where God is, and God is clearly with who you are.